The war had destroyed everything except for one thing, her. Amid the ruins of Nova Centauri, Marcus Vega, a seasoned combat medic, had witnessed all kinds of suffering. But this was a nightmare he never could have imagined. The Aerodani forces fought with a brutality unlike anything he had ever seen, leaving nothing but devastation in their wake. As Marcus walked through the wreckage, he thought he had seen the worst of the horrors of war. That was until his eyes fell on her, an Aerodani female, buried under the debris, her silver-blue blood pooling around her fragile form. Instinct told him to follow protocol, tag her, leave her behind, don't get involved. But the look in her eyes, full of fear, weakness, yet desperate, it made him stop. He lowered his weapon. "I'm not here to hurt you," Marcus whispered, kneeling beside her. And in that moment, a life-changing decision was made. He injected her with forbidden technology, an experimental nanite system, risky, reckless. But in that moment, he couldn't let her die. The nanites flowed into her body, causing changes Marcus had never seen before. Her body began to heal, and then light. Her body began to repair itself, and her eyes, once full of fear, now held a deep trust, as if she knew Marcus had not only saved her life but also their fates. "You saved me," she breathed, her voice like an ethereal melody. But just as quickly, reality hit. A warning blared in Marcus' ear, unauthorized cybernetic activity detected. Containment teams en route. They weren't just being hunted. They were targeted. And if they were caught, she would be destroyed. Marcus would face execution. There was no choice but to run. They stole a Terran shuttle, launching into space with military ships hot on their tail. But that wasn't the worst part. The truth began to emerge. This war wasn't just about survival. It was a lie, orchestrated by powerful forces manipulating everything for their own gain. And Marcus? He was just a pawn in this game. Together, they would have to fight not just for survival, but to uncover the truth. These forces had turned both of them into pawns in a game with no way out. But as they dug deeper, they uncovered a chilling truth. An ancient race, hidden in the shadows, had been manipulating both sides, fueling the war to maintain their power. So how do you face an enemy you can't even see? That was the question they had to answer now. And just when they thought it was all over, the most terrifying truth of all would leave you breathless. They didn't just have to run, they had to confront the very forces that created this war. Their adventure was only just beginning. Now, it wasn't just a war between two species. It was a fight against destiny itself. Would they survive long enough to expose the truth and change the fate of the entire galaxy? Stay tuned, because what they discover next will shock you to your core. The scene unfolds like an eerie whisper through the silence of a barren, forgotten battlefield. Marcus steps forward, weapon in hand, his every movement deliberate, yet filled with uncertainty. The air is thick with tension, as though the very ground beneath him holds its breath. And then, he sees her. Half buried in the dust, her form barely discernible from the wreckage around her. Her skin, pale as moonlight, contrasts starkly against the dark earth. But it's the blood that freezes him, silver blue, pooling in a slow, deliberate spread, like the ink of an unknown cosmos spilling across the soil. She's not like the soldiers he's trained to face. No armor. No weapons. Her delicate frame seems almost fragile, the faint rise and fall of her chest the only sign that she is alive. He takes a step closer. His heart hammers in his chest. She's a scientist, he realizes. The worn edges of her uniform speak of a mind dedicated to discovery, not warfare. A truth that adds a layer of urgency to his every breath. Her eyes flutter open. The sight of them steals his breath away, liquid mercury, flickering, as though an ancient storm rages within them. There's no recognition, only raw terror. A primal fear that grips her soul. His grip tightens on his weapon, but then, something inside him shifts. He lowers it slowly, voice barely a whisper, the words drenched in something unspoken. "I'm not here to hurt you." His eyes scan her rapidly, his trained mind working faster than his hands. Multiple fractures, internal damage that could take her life in minutes if not treated. The severity of it hits him with full force, her body's near collapse. There's no time for hesitation. But there's something else, something in the air. The weight of an unspoken promise, the kind that stirs ancient memories of times long forgotten. He pulls out a prototype nanite kit, an unauthorized device, one that could get him court-martialed if it was ever discovered. But there's no choice. The standard procedures won't save her. Command won't help you, but I will, he murmurs to himself, the words heavy with resolve, but also the knowledge that this moment, this choice could change everything. He injects the nanites, his fingers steady despite the panic swirling in his chest. Silence falls. The world holds its breath. Suddenly, her body convulses, an ethereal glow igniting beneath her skin. Strange, intricate patterns pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat, as if the nanites are awakening something deep within her. The wounds, those horrific gashes and bruises, begin to mend themselves, the blood stains fading as though they were never there. Her eyes lock onto his. Mercury and mystery entwined in a gaze that feels like it reaches into his very soul. You saved me, she whispers, her voice halting, melodic, like the final notes of an ancient song long forgotten. Time stands still. The warning pierces the air like a jagged scream. Unauthorized cybernetic activity detected. The voice is cold, mechanical, echoing across Marcus's COMM link. Panic surges through him, his instincts kicking in. His heart pounds in his ears, and the metallic taste of fear clings to the back of his throat. Containment teams are on their way. He barely processes the threat as his gaze snaps back to Thala, still recovering from the initial shock. Her body is mending, the nanites working their magic, but she's still weak. The air around them crackles with tension. Come on, Marcus mutters under his breath, urgency lacing his words. He pulls her up, his hands surprisingly gentle for someone who's used to holding weapons, not lives. We have to go. Now. They move quickly, their footsteps echoing in the cold, sterile halls. The walls, once a silent witness to death and destruction, now seem to close in on them. But Marcus isn't looking back. His mind is already 2 steps ahead, calculating escape routes and options. They find a small Terran shuttle, barely large enough to hold them both. A quiet hum reverberates through the hull as Marcus punches in the access code, praying the system hasn't locked down yet. The engines roar to life, a sound that vibrates through their very bones, and they shoot off into the void. The world outside their window is a blur, dark, starless space stretching endlessly, as if mocking their attempts to flee. Military ships materialize in their wake, silent predators that immediately lock onto the shuttle's weak poles. The chase is on. Inside the shuttle, the air is thick with tension. Marcus glances at Thala. She's staring at the control panel, her expression intense, focused. It's then that he notices the subtle shift, the way her hands hover over the console, her fingers twitching like they are reaching for something. A soft hum rises from the controls. Her eyes flicker with an odd glow as the nanites surge within her, adjusting her senses to the unfamiliar technology. Marcus watches, mesmerized, as she connects with the ship's systems, not in the way a human would, but in the way a machine might interface with its own kind. The ship responds to her touch, the controls flickering with life as she directs them. She's adapting faster than he thought possible, the nanites enhancing her understanding of human technology, bending it to her will. Hold on. Marcus warns as he yanks the shuttle's throttle, sending them hurtling toward the asteroid field. The rocky debris looms ahead, sharp and jagged, but it's their only chance. The pursuit is relentless, the military ships gaining ground, their weapons systems locked on their tail. They skim through the asteroid field, narrowly dodging the deadly rocks as they explode in showers of debris. The shuttle is a blur of metal and speed, weaving through the asteroids with a precision that defies the chaos surrounding them. Thala is calm now, her movements fluid as she helps navigate the dangerous terrain, guiding them through narrow gaps and hidden tunnels between the floating rocks. The nanites within her are working in overdrive, their alien influence syncing with the ship's systems in ways that should be impossible. A final, heart-stopping maneuver sends them into a clearing. The military ships are far behind now, lost in a maze of asteroids. But the silence inside the shuttle is deafening. They've made it. Breathless, Marcus slumps into his seat, but there's no relief, no moment of triumph. Only the realization that their escape has come at a cost. They are fugitives now, marked, hunted, and alone in a universe that will not show mercy. The stars outside feel suddenly far away, cold, and indifferent. Thala looks at him, her eyes still flickering with that strange, liquid mercury glow. What now? Her voice is steady, but the question is heavy with uncertainty. Marcus doesn't have an answer. Not yet. The days stretch on in the cramped shuttle, time blurring into the quiet hum of engines and the steady pulse of the stars outside. Space, once infinite and vast, now feels confining, almost suffocating. Yet in this confined space, something unexpected begins to happen, a slow, unspoken understanding, a quiet unraveling of the walls they've both built around themselves. The walls, both literal and metaphorical, begin to crack. They talk. At first, it's only practical things, navigation, the stars, the planets they pass. But the conversation shifts gradually, the words becoming more personal, more revealing with each passing day. The awkwardness fades, replaced by the raw, unguarded truth they've each been hiding. Thala's voice is soft at first, hesitant as she begins to share her past. She tells him of her work, of her role as a xenobiologist studying humans, not as an enemy, but as a subject of wonder. Her fascination with Earth's creatures, the complexities of their biology, their emotions, their ability to adapt. She speaks of her research, of the mysteries she had hoped to solve, the questions she had been chasing. But it had never been meant to lead her here, to this life or death flight through space with a stranger who had become something more. Her words are filled with longing, a longing for the world she once knew, the work she once loved. And through it all, Marcus listens, his eyes soft, absorbing the pain and curiosity in her voice. When it's his turn, Marcus opens up. He speaks of Earth, of its final rainforest, one of the last untouched places on the planet before it had all but vanished, destroyed by greed and war. The memory of it haunts him still, a constant reminder of the world he had once hoped to protect. A world that now exists only in fragments, as broken as the land it had once covered. He tells her of his dream, not of fighting, but of healing. Of restoring what had been lost, if it's even possible. The idealism in his words is palpable, but there's a weariness there too, an understanding that sometimes dreams are the only things that keep you going when everything else falls apart. The shuttle grows quieter as night falls, the stars outside casting faint glows through the small porthole. Sleep is a fragile thing in this place, short, fitful, often haunted by the memories of what they've lost. One night, Marcus wakes with a start. The nightmare lingers in the edges of his mind, the familiar sensation of suffocating, of drowning in a world that has slipped beyond repair. His breath comes in sharp, jagged gasps, his chest tight as though the weight of the past is pressing down on him. And then, he feels it, a soft, warm pressure on his hand. Startled, he looks up, blinking away the remnants of sleep and fear. Thala is beside him, her body warm against his in the dim light of the shuttle. Her fingers are wrapped around his hand, her grip gentle, but firm as silent comfort in the chaos of his mind. "Marcus," she says quietly, her voice soft as she searches his eyes. "It's just a dream. You're safe." The warmth of her touch lingers long after her words have faded. He swallows hard, nodding, but the connection between them lingers, an electric thread that draws them closer even in the dark, even in the silence. They don't speak much after that. There's no need for words. The space between them, once filled with uncertainty and distance, now seems to shrink. A bond is forming between them, something deeper than mere friendship, something neither of them is ready to acknowledge, but neither can deny. The shuttle moves through space, but their worlds are slowly colliding. Small, accidental touches become more frequent, her hand brushing against his as they work, her shoulder leaning lightly against his during moments of shared silence. Every touch, every lingering glance, sparks something undeniable, a quiet pull that neither of them can ignore. Each touch feels like a promise, a secret, an invitation to something both terrifying and beautiful. Neither of them speaks it aloud, but the air between them crackles with unspoken words, the longing of two souls tethered together by fate and something deeper, more intimate than either is willing to admit. And yet, neither of them pulls away. The universe outside may be vast, but inside this small shuttle, something is growing, a connection forged in the quiet, in the space between words, in the moments when their hands accidentally brush, their gazes linger a second too long. It's something neither can escape. The shuttle coasts into the vicinity of Nexus Point, the chaotic trading outpost teeming with life at the edge of known space. A hive of activity, a place where anyone can be bought, sold, or hidden. Its streets are a patchwork of different species, voices, and languages. In the shadows, deals are struck, and secrets are traded, all beneath the constant flicker of neon lights and the hum of malfunctioning machinery. It's the perfect place for fugitives like them. Marcus and Thala don't stand out here, blending seamlessly into the crowd. Their every move calculated, their presence carefully hidden. Thala's striking, otherworldly appearance would draw too much attention in the wrong places, so she keeps her hood drawn low, the shadows offering her protection. Marcus, ever the observer, keeps his gaze steady, scanning the alleyways, the busy market stalls, always alert. They are ghosts now, fugitives hiding in plain sight. Marcus takes up a quiet position as an unlicensed medic. In a place like Nexus Point, there's always someone who needs help, someone willing to pay in the currency of favors, or sometimes, just information. His hands are steady as he applies medical care, treating wounds that tell stories of violence, desperation, and survival. The work is grueling, but it's a way to keep a low profile, to avoid the ever-watchful eyes of informants who might report a pair like them. Thala, on the other hand, keeps to herself. She doesn't leave the rented room often, only venturing out to gather supplies or when the need arises. She spends her time training, honing her strange new abilities, her control over energy fields, her ability to enhance machines with a mere thought. The nanites coursing through her body seem to have unlocked something in her, a power she's still trying to understand. At times, it feels as though her very essence has merged with the technology around her. She can feel the pulse of machines, the hum of energy, as if it speaks to her in a language no one else understands. Her abilities grow stronger each day, and with them, the mystery of her transformation deepens. Their lives are quiet here, quiet, but not peaceful. They are constantly aware of the ever-present danger, the weight of their status as fugitives pressing down on them. The nights are long, the stars outside just distant pinpricks of light, as cold and unfeeling as the world they've left behind. But amid the silence, something else is growing. It starts with a glance, a soft brush of fingers as they pass each other in the cramped room. It's nothing at first, a fleeting touch, a momentary spark. But it lingers, that electric pull, like the flicker of a flame waiting to ignite. The space between them feels charged now, heavy with unspoken words, with feelings that neither of them is ready to acknowledge. The growing tension is palpable, building like the pressure before a storm. The tiny rented room, with its worn furniture and flickering lights, becomes a universe unto itself, a universe that is small and intimate, and yet vast in its weight. One night, after a long day of working, of hiding, of surviving, they lie back to back on a narrow bed. The space between them is almost unbearable, and yet they don't move. Thala's hand brushes Marcus's in the quiet dark, a gentle, accidental touch, but it feels like an invitation, a spark in the night. Her skin is warm, the electricity of her touch a direct connection to the power she's learned to control. It's the kind of touch that sends a jolt through his chest, a reminder of the bond they share, strange and deep, unspoken but undeniable. He feels the pull too, as if the very air between them is alive, charged with something they can no longer ignore. In that moment, time feels suspended, as if the entire universe holds its breath. Marcus turns, the tension between them snapping, and before either of them can speak, his lips find hers in a kiss that is tentative at first, soft, uncertain, like they are testing the waters of a bond neither fully understands. But then the kiss deepens, a fire igniting in the quiet dark. It's more than just a kiss, it's an explosion of connection, of everything they've been feeling but hadn't known how to express. The nanites within them react as if waking from a long slumber, bursting to life with a power neither of them could have anticipated. The energy that surges between them is like a supernova, a pulse of light and heat that makes the very walls around them tremble. For a moment, there is nothing but them, their bond, their hearts, the universe exploding in light. And then, as the kiss finally breaks, they lie there in the darkness, breathless, their hands still intertwined, the connection between them pulsing stronger than ever. They don't speak, but the words don't need to be said. They both know, deep in their bones, that this moment has changed everything. They are no longer just fugitives, no longer just allies in a fight for survival. They are something more, something neither of them has the words for. Something neither of them can escape. And for the first time, neither of them wants to. The peace they had found is shattered in an instant. The sound is sudden, violent. There's a sharp knock, then a pounding on the door that reverberates through the tiny, dimly lit room. It's the kind of noise that could freeze your blood, a harbinger of doom. Marcus jumps to his feet, heart leaping into his throat, the adrenaline kicking in before he even understands what's happening. Thala is already moving, her eyes wide with shock, but her body instinctively reacting. They both know what this means. "They've found us," Marcus mutters, panic creeping into his voice despite his best efforts to stay calm. They don't have time to think, to process. The sound of boots echo in the hallway outside, heavy and authoritative. Station security. Without a word, they rush to the back of the room. Marcus pulls a panel off the wall, revealing a small, hidden maintenance tunnel. He motions for Thala to go first, his hands trembling as he glances toward the door one last time. The pounding is getting louder. More frantic. They squeeze through the narrow tunnel, the cold, damp air pressing in from all sides. They run further into the bowels of the station, desperate to stay ahead, to escape. The twists and turns of the tunnel offer a brief sense of hope, but they both know it's fleeting. The heavy boots outside are joined now by the unmistakable hum of scanners. The chase is on. They push forward, but it's too late. As they emerge into a maintenance room, the sight before them steals their breath. Director Krell stands there, his cold, calculating eyes fixed on them, flanked by Archon Vs, an imposing figure, the unmistakable insignia of Aerodani High Command emblazoned on his chest. The realization hits like a tidal wave, a sickening weight crashing down. They were never safe. They were never meant to be. Marcus. Thala, Krell's voice is low, dripping with disdain. You've been running from the truth. Thala takes a step back, her breath shallow, her hand instinctively reaching for the control panel at her side. But it's too late. There's nowhere left to go. You've both been pawns in a game much bigger than you, Krell continues, his smile thin and cruel. The truth? Thala's injury was never an accident. It was part of the plan, always part of the plan. Marcus's chest tightens as the words land like a blow. His mind races, but it's like trying to process a nightmare in real time. What are you talking about? Thala's gaze flickers, but there's no more fear in her eyes, just a cold, hard recognition. She knew something was off. She had always suspected, but now the full weight of it crashes over her. Thala was never meant to be a victim, Krell says, his voice almost a whisper now, as though savoring the moment. She's the prototype. The first of a new kind of soldier blending Terran technology with Aerodani biology. You were manipulated, Marcus. You were never meant to save her. You were meant to follow orders, to play your part in this twisted experiment. Thala's breath hitches, and for the first time since they met, she looks at Marcus, really looks at him. There's a flicker of anger in her eyes, but it's quickly replaced by something darker. Betrayal. Her lips tremble, but she stays silent, as if the truth has pierced her to her very core. She was never a person to them. She was always a weapon. Marcus feels the ground beneath him shift. His heart pounds against his ribs, and a wave of nausea crashes over him. The weight of what he's been a part of, what they've both been a part of, feels unbearable. How could he have been so blind? How could he have trusted in something so fragile, so fleeting? He begins, voice shaking, but no words come. There's nothing to say, nothing that can undo the damage. You're both the same, Krell continues, his words like ice. You were always meant to be disposable, to serve the greater mission. But now? Now you're just inconvenient. He steps forward, and the menacing tone of the situation escalates, as if he's already decided their fate. The air between Marcus and Thala crackles with everything unsaid: anger, confusion, heartbreak, and betrayal. Marcus turns to her, eyes wide with disbelief. Thala, this was all a lie? Thala's voice is barely a whisper, the pain in her words evident. I didn't ask for this. You think I wanted to be a weapon? A tool to manipulate? But that's what I've been, and you were never supposed to be part of this. The tension between them is unbearable. A silent understanding passes through them, a realization that the bond they've shared, the trust, the intimacy, has been built on a lie. They were never allies, never truly equal. They were both trapped, manipulated by forces they could never have predicted. Anger and heartbreak flare like fire between them, igniting something dark and desperate. As the figures of Krell and VES close in, Marcus and Thala exchange one last glance. In that moment, the walls between them fall away entirely, leaving only two people betrayed, broken, and unwilling to be pawns any longer. And as the darkness of their future presses in, they know one thing with absolute certainty. They are no longer just running from the enemy. They are running from the truth. The air is thick with tension, the heavy silence broken only by the sound of distant footsteps, soon to be followed by the harsh clanging of boots on metal, closing in. Marcus and Thala stand back to back, facing the imminent danger. Their bodies are tense, muscles coiled like springs, their hearts beating in unison, fueled by the same desperate need for escape. They don't speak. Words aren't necessary anymore. Their bond, forged through shared pain and fragile trust, hums between them, pulsing stronger than ever. The nanites within them, once separate, now seem to merge into a single, cohesive force, and it's as if they can feel each other's thoughts, their fears, their intentions. There's no hesitation in their movements, only the pure understanding that they are each other's only ally, their only chance. In that moment, everything becomes instinct. Without warning, Thala moves first. Her eyes flash with a brilliance that blinds the room, the pure light erupting from her body like a wave, cascading outward in a burst of blinding energy. The enemies before them stagger back, hands thrown up to shield their faces, but it's too late. The light cuts through the darkness, disorienting and blinding them in a single, searing pulse. The air crackles with the energy of her power, the sudden silence following the explosion of light a testament to the devastation she's wrought. For a split second, there's nothing but the ringing in their ears, the sound of blood rushing through their veins. And then, Marcus moves. The precision is terrifying. A blur of motion, fluid and deadly. His body moves with lethal grace, each strike a perfect, calculated blow. There's no hesitation, no mercy, just the ruthless efficiency of a soldier who's been trained to kill. His fists land with bone-crushing force, and the soldiers who stand in his way crumble to the floor, incapacitated before they even have time to react. His movements are sharp, quick, efficient, every strike a testament to his training, his focus, his unrelenting drive to survive. Together, they are unstoppable. Back to back, trusting completely, they carve their way through the chaos. The enemies close in, but with every step, the two of them grow more in sync, more connected. They anticipate each other's movements, working in perfect harmony. Thala blinds them, and Marcus clears the path, each move, each action, part of an unspoken dance of survival. They are more than just allies, they are a force, a single entity made of two bodies, bound by a shared fate. But the situation is still dire. They don't have much time. There's no grand plan, just a desperate need to escape, to flee before the enemy regroups and corners them. They charge forward, their backs still pressed together, the world around them a blur of violence and destruction. Ahead of them, they spot their only chance, an old, rusted maintenance vessel, abandoned and forgotten, its engines barely functional. It's their way out. Without missing a beat, they race toward it. The door slides open with a groan of protest, and they dive inside, Thala closing it behind them with a swift motion. The vessel's control panel flickers to life, sparking and sputtering, but Thala's hands are already moving, her fingers dancing across the controls. The nanites within her pulse again, interfacing with the old Terran technology like a second skin, bringing it to life with ease. Marcus doesn't wait. He secures the hatch, double-checking every lock, every seal, before strapping himself into the seat. His eyes flicker to Thala, who's now focusing on the engines, her brow furrowed in concentration. He doesn't speak, there's no need, but his gaze holds a quiet promise. They are getting out of this. Together. The engines sputter, then roar to life, the ship shaking as it lurches forward. Thala pulls the throttle back, and the vessel jolts into motion, narrowly avoiding a blast from the station's security grid. They race toward the opening bay doors, and just as the alarms scream louder, just as the world seems to close in, the ship bursts into the cold, vast expanse of space. The station fades behind them, a distant memory now, lost in the infinite blackness. For a moment, the silence of space envelopes them. It's not peaceful, far from it. The weight of what they've just done hangs heavy between them. But in this moment, in the midst of the chaos, they have escaped. Together. Thala exhales, her body relaxing for the first time since the fight began. She glances over at Marcus, her expression unreadable for a moment, and then her lips curve into the smallest of smiles. "You know," she says, her voice soft, "I thought we were both done for?" Marcus meets her gaze, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. "Me too." They share a quiet moment, their bond pulsing between them stronger, deeper, more unbreakable than before. But they both know, the fight is far from over. The galaxy is vast, and their enemies are relentless. But for now, in this moment, they are free. And that's enough. For now. The silence between them grows heavier as the maintenance vessel drifts further into the cold expanse of space, its engines humming quietly beneath the stars. The stars outside seem distant now, cold and indifferent. It feels like a moment of respite, but Marcus and Thala both know it's fleeting. They sit side by side in the cockpit, the dim glow of control panels casting shadows across their faces. Thala is still focused on the ship's systems, her fingers occasionally flicking over the console with a fluidity that betrays her newfound connection to technology. But there's something in her eyes, a flicker of something deeper, darker, a truth she's been holding back. Marcus doesn't press her. He doesn't need to. They both know what's at stake. But then, she speaks. "I downloaded something," Thala says, her voice quiet but firm, as if she's only just found the strength to say it out loud. Marcus looks over at her, sensing the weight in her words. "What did you find?" Her gaze flickers to him briefly, her eyes still tinged with the unmistakable light of the nanites within her. "While I was linked to the station's systems, I found files. Hidden ones. Codes, data that didn't belong." He leans forward, his heart quickening. "What kind of files?" Her breath catches, and she glances away, staring out at the void beyond the ship's windows. It's as if she's searching for something in the endless stars, trying to find a thread of meaning in a vast nothingness. The kind that explains everything. Her voice hardens, the truth finally spilling out, relentless. Both the Terran and Aerodani governments have been engineering this war. They've been sabotaging peace talks, manipulating events, stoking the flames of conflict. And for what? She turns her gaze to him now, her eyes filled with an intensity he hasn't seen before. For power. For profit. They don't care who they destroy, as long as the war continues. Marcus's stomach tightens as the gravity of her words sinks in. But, why? Why would they want this? Thala's expression darkens, a shadow passing over her face. Because war is a business. It's a currency. The weapons, the resources, the control over both Terran and Aerodani colonies, everything feeds into a machine that thrives on conflict. And peace would end that. Her words hit like a hammer to the chest. The truth of it is almost too much to bear, too monstrous to comprehend. It's not just a war, it's a carefully orchestrated cycle of profit, manipulation, and death. The lives lost in the endless conflict, the families torn apart, the soldiers like Marcus who are used and discarded, all of it was deliberate. But there's more, much worse. Thala leans back in her seat, her voice lowering to a near whisper, as if the very nature of what she's about to say is too dangerous to even speak aloud. That's not the worst of it, she says, her tone heavy with the weight of a truth too big to ignore. There's something else, someone else. Marcus doesn't speak, but his heart races, a cold shiver running down his spine. He can feel the impending dread in the air. The war isn't just being manipulated by the governments, she continues, her voice tinged with disbelief. There's an ancient race. Hidden for centuries. They've been feeding off this conflict, the suffering, the destruction. They've been manipulating both sides from the shadows, using the war as a tool to keep themselves sustained, to stay hidden, to grow stronger. Marcus blinks, his mind struggling to process her words. An ancient race? How could they have stayed hidden all this time? Thala's hands tighten around the controls, her gaze distant. Because they've perfected the art of concealment. They've woven themselves into the fabric of the conflict, pulling strings without anyone ever noticing. They use fear, pain, loss, the very essence of war to feed and thrive. And as long as the war continues, they grow. They are the true architects of this destruction, the ones who have set everything in motion. For a moment, the silence between them is unbearable. It's as though the universe itself holds its breath, the weight of her words pressing down on them both. The war they've been fighting in, the one they thought was about nations, about peoples, about ideologies, it was never about any of that. It was about something darker, something older. And now, they are part of it. The players in a game that they never even knew existed. Marcus leans back in his seat, his chest tight, his mind racing. He can't reconcile the idea of an ancient race, hidden in the shadows, manipulating the galaxy for their own gain. It sounds impossible, like something from a myth or a nightmare. But the cold truth in Thala's eyes tells him that it isn't. How do we stop them? Marcus finally asks, his voice rough, strained. Thala looks over at him, her expression a mixture of determination and despair. I don't know. But we have to try. Because if we don't stop them, then everything we've fought for, everything we've lost, will have been for nothing. The silence settles in again, but now, it's different. It's a shared understanding, a recognition that their fight is far bigger than they ever imagined. The war was never just between the Terran and Aerodani. It was never just about two species clashing. It was always about something older, more insidious, a feeding ground for an ancient, hidden race that has manipulated them all. And now, they are the ones who must stop it. But how? How do you fight an enemy who's been in the shadows for centuries? And so, Marcus Vega, the battle-hardened combat medic, and Thala, the mysterious Aerodani female, found themselves thrust into a conflict far greater than they could have ever imagined. What started as a desperate act of mercy, saving an enemy soldier from certain death, turned into a fight for truth, a fight to expose the dark forces manipulating the war that was tearing their worlds apart. Together, they discovered that the war between the Terran and Aerodani wasn't a battle for survival, it was a carefully orchestrated game, masterminded by powerful entities using the endless conflict to fuel their own power. But the most shocking revelation of all? An ancient, hidden race was pulling the strings, feeding off the chaos and destruction, playing both sides like pawns in a cosmic chess game. With the odds stacked against them and the galaxy hunting them down, Marcus and Thala didn't just fight for their lives, they fought for the truth, for peace, and for a future where their worlds could coexist. Along the way, they formed a bond that transcended species, one that shattered the boundaries of war, technology, and even the heart. This is just the beginning of their journey, one where betrayal, power, and a universe of secrets await. But this story isn't over yet. If you want to find out what happens next, make sure to subscribe, and stay tuned for more mind-blowing twists and revelations. We've only scratched the surface of the truth they are about to uncover, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Hit that notification bell, and we'll see you in the next chapter.